Hi there, welcome. My name's Andrea Gartner, and I am chair of the Danbury Democratic Party. And once again, in our live remote studios for Community Forum, I'm welcoming Senator Julie Kushner.
Hi there, how are you? It's great to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you again. So I feel that every time we connect, that there is just so many things unfolding on the state level. And for those who aren't familiar with the area, the district that you represent, it's the 24th district in Hartford in the Senate, and that represents a portion of Bethel over on the Stony Hill area, all of Danbury, all of New Fairfield, and all of Sherman. So I can once again imagine, I know how busy you've been answering constituent concerns in the light of the pandemic, and also a special session that's happened up on Hartford. But in the meantime, people have been mailed out their absentee ballot applications. So I thought we would take some time today to explain what that process is and maybe answer some questions that people are having.
Absolutely. Let me just start by saying that the absentee ballot application was mailed out, and so you should have received it in the mail like I did. It comes in official mailing, and that was done by executive order. And this absentee application is for our election that's for the primary election, which is in August. So there will also be a November election, but we haven't gotten to that yet. So the absentee ballot you received is a great opportunity to check and make sure that you can vote safely and efficiently by absentee ballot. We don't really know what the conditions are going to be in November. So even if you could go to vote in August, even if you felt like it was a safe way to vote, and there will be polls open in August for the primary, I think I'm going to vote by absentee because I feel like it's a great opportunity to make sure I got my application on time, I filled it out properly, I get my ballot mailed to me then, and then I have the opportunity to make sure everything worked in this presidential primary that we're facing in August. So that's why I'm happy we're talking about it today, and we're going to be talking about a lot with constituents to answer questions. Probably the biggest question I get two main questions from constituents. The first is this my ballot? No, this is not your ballot. This is your application. So every single registered voter in Connecticut got mailed to them pre-stamped envelope with the application for an absentee ballot. And so first, it's a two-step process. First, you have to send in the application, then you'll get the ballot back, and you'll vote then, and you will then send your ballot in. So it's a two-step process. So that's for the presidential primary, which is August 11th. And I am not on the ballot for August 11th. We do not have a primary for any of the state rep or state senator positions in the district, and we do not have a primary for the congressional seat either. So what people will be voting on in their absentee ballot will be voting on the presidential primary. And so it might seem like there isn't a lot of controversy on either party about who the candidate will be for president. It's still a great opportunity for us to vote, to show that the vote is important to all of us, but also to test out this absentee balloting that we're doing in a major way for the first time in the state. And so I hope everyone will take the time and fill out that application and get it done quickly.
Yeah, I think that's important to emphasize. So while, like you said, there's not going to be any surprises in this primary, and there's some presumptive nominees on both sides of the aisle with this presidential primary. But I think it is very much worth it, and as a civic exercise to fill out this application and then get mailed a ballot. I have not ever voted absentee. I've always been around for elections. So some of the questions that do come up, a lot of people are misinformed that it is indeed not an application, but the ballot itself, and that's not true. The ballots have been mailed, as you pointed out, Senator, to registered voters. There's a small
application. The application.
The application, yeah. Thank you. To most registered voters, there's a small portion of voters who might be deemed inactive according to the voter registration rolls, and that could be as simple as maybe you moved and you hadn't registered, or there's various reasons why you might be not considered an active voter. But that's a small percentage of all the ballots. About 720,000 voters in Connecticut have been identified, and the applications have gone out to them. Now, the applications aren't coming all at once. So there's people who have received them. You said you've received yours, Senator. I have also received mine. And I was on the phone today with our Democratic Registrar of Voters, Joan Belizna, to find out when like a last date might be. And the recommendation is that if you do not receive your your application for a ballot before Monday, July 13th, then do feel free to call the town clerk and ask for one. If you don't have access to a computer. If you do have access to a computer, you can download the application from the Secretary of State's website and then fill that out, drop it in the mail, and then you'll get your ballot sent in the mail.
There's another important thing to point out about this. If you go to the website, as Andrea just mentioned, you will find that you can get a ballot application in Spanish. And you may want to do that. You may choose to feel more comfortable getting it in Spanish language. In the past, we had applications that were printed on both sides, English and Spanish on one side. This time, the application for the ballot, as you can see, is just printed on one side. And so it's only printed in English. I know that many of our residents here in Danbury are more comfortable in their first language, and that being Spanish. But if you go to the Secretary of State website, there is a link there to get the application in Spanish. And I know that I'm going to be posting about this on my Facebook page today. And so I will have a link directly to the Secretary of State, both in English and in Spanish, in case you didn't get your ballot application and you want to, or maybe you missed it in the mail and you want to download one and fill it in and send it in yourself, you can always do that. The other thing, Andrea, that I know that you're aware of, we've had a few constituents who've already called us and pointed out that it's really important when you put it back in the envelope. You can see here, that's my name and my address. That's what got sent to me. But when I fill it out, you want to make sure when you put it back in the envelope that it goes to the right place. So this is the address for our registrar of voters for our town hall. And when you put it in the envelope, some people told us that it wasn't folded properly. And unless you refold it, it won't show up in the window. So when you're filling out your ballot, take the time to make sure when you fill out your application that after you put it back in the envelope, take a look and make sure that the address of your town hall, whether that's Danbury, Bethel, Sherman, or New Fairfield, make sure you can see it through the window. So, it's just one of those things where it's a very important official document and you want to make sure you do everything correctly. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but if you just check one time before you drop it in the mail, that will avoid problems down the road.
Yeah, and the fix is simple. It's just kind of nudging and refolding it so that it appears on the window. Another concern some people have brought up is what happens if you haven't received the application. So you've gone online or you've called your town clerk in the town where you live, and you've received another application. You filled it out, you send it, and then you receive yours in the mail. There is no chance of you getting two ballots. So the system is set up so that it's once an application's returned and a ballot's been sent, that there's no chance of another ballot being sent and two ballots being sent to the same address.
Yeah, I know that We have gotten some constituent emails about people having concern about voter fraud. We've gotten far more, many, many times more, asking us to enact absentee balloting for the November election, since that decision has not yet been made. And for those of you who are concerned about fraud, we are very much aware of protections against voter fraud. And we have looked at other states that have had absentee balloting in place, no excuse absentee balloting in place, early balloting, mail balloting. There are many other states that are already doing this. We're in the minority, small minority of states like ours that have not done it yet. And what has been found in studies in those states that there hasn't been any demonstration of any increased voter fraud. So I am not concerned about that. I am concerned that every single person has the opportunity to vote, and that no one should feel like they have to risk their life to go into a polling site and vote. So I truly believe that our democracy is most protected when we make the vote much more accessible to everyone. So as I mentioned earlier, the polls will be open, but the absentee balloting is really, really important for so many people who are concerned about their health during this health crisis. And
I think too, for people, so there will be some, it'll be a unique election year this year for sure, because one of the other challenges, and also why there is such a strong urging among people to get your application, fill it out, get your absentee ballot, and at least for the presidential primary, is to get into the habit of potentially voting by mail, because a lot of the poll workers that generally, we have 7 polling stations in Danbury, generally who work the polls tend to be in a COVID group, a susceptible group, over 60, over 65. So and it's also been demonstrated in some other states where poll workers are afraid to show up because of the exposure to COVID-19. So with more mail-in ballots, there will be less stress the day of voting, and the need for poll workers to be physically.
That's absolutely correct. And that leads me to the November election. So I mentioned I've gotten a ton of emails and messages from people on Facebook really urging us to take action so that there is an opportunity for absentee balloting broadly also in November for the presidential election. And obviously I am on the ballot in that November election, as are all of our state rep and our Senate throughout the state. And our congressional election is also, our candidate is on the ballot there too, Johanna Hazen, our Congresswoman. So the executive order power of the governor expires on September 9th. And as a result, he cannot sign an executive order as he did for the primary that would order absentee balloting. We expect to take up the issue in a special session, and there's a few things to talk about around special session, but I'll start with the absentee balloting. All of the members of the legislature, whether, all the 4 caucuses have been discussing this, and there is general agreement amongst the Democratic caucuses of both the House and the Senate that we have important need to pass a statutory change that allows the same process of absentee balloting to take place in November as well. Our statute currently, our Constitution says that a person can vote by absentee in the case of illness. In our statute, it says in the case of his or her illness. So our our constitutional attorneys, they have all advised us that a statutory change that clarifies that in the case of illness, that you can vote by absentee ballot, that fix will allow us to have the same process where applications are mailed to registered voters, and then any voter who chooses to can vote by absentee. And I think for the November election, it feels very, very important. And I feel like we've done very well in Connecticut. People are very pleased with the fact that the number of hospitalizations is way down, under 100 now. We had a good weekend where we had no new hospitalizations. We have a reduction in the number of deaths. It's really, we're doing remarkably well in Connecticut, but we know that's not the case around the country. And it concerns us a great deal that with so much of a uptick in other states, and especially in the state that we talk about a lot is Florida, where the number of cases each day is just, it's heartbreaking what's happening there. And we can't be certain that that won't also become a problem again here in Connecticut. And so I think we need to prepare for November as if we're going to be in another wave of COVID-19. Let me just say, we all hope that that does not happen. So nobody is wishing for this. We're just planning for it. It's important that we're prepared because our November election is just so important. We can't be caught off guard and caught without mechanisms so that everyone has the opportunity to vote. So I think it's really important.
What's happened and folded in some other state primaries has demonstrated, for example, in Georgia, where many poll workers didn't show up because they were afraid to be exposed to the virus.
Of course.
And in Connecticut, my understanding is that the controversy is really around, there's very specific reasons as to why you can vote absentee. If you're serving in the military, if you're going to be traveling, if you're sick, you can't get out of bed, you have a physical disability. So there are very specific reasons as to why you need to vote absentee. And I feel like to broaden it and just make that, it's simple, but it's not, but that statutory change would allow for the planning to happen in November, should we see a resurgence. And then just in general, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if we still have such trouble with viruses emerging and having such an impact on humans.
Right. I mean, I think the whole voting question is a topic that we've been taking up in the legislature for a long time. And we did take action on it in the 2019 session. Majority voted for the ability to have no excuse absentee balloting. It requires long-term, it would require a constitutional change, which requires a referendum, and we are on track to carry that out. I think, personally, I said it before, I really strongly believe that the most important aspect of our democracy is to make sure people have access to voting and that people engage in voting in large numbers. And anything we can do to increase the percentage of people that participate in our elections, that helps protect our democracy. And so I'm a very strong advocate for the ability to vote by mail. We've seen it work in other states and work very, very well. And so I'm hopeful that this opportunity for us to demonstrate the effectiveness of this, not because we chose to at this moment, but because of the pandemic. I mean, it's one of those, there are many aspects of this pandemic that have forced us to take some actions that may prove to us to be actions we want to preserve for the future. And we have the ability to do that through statute and through referendums. And so it's a long-term issue, but right now, what's most important is if you have any questions about your ballot, or your ballot application, I've already gotten a number of constituents. As Andrea knows, I refer some of the questions to her and to our registrar of voters. If each town registrar of voters is the best person for you to contact, or the town clerk, but you can always contact me or any of your representatives, and we'll help you with this. And I'm going to do a Facebook post today because I've been saving this for today when I wanted to put it on Facebook and show people how easy it is to cast your ballot by apply for your ballot through Absentee.
And the truth is too that should you apply, send in your application, receive your ballot, and then decide that it's okay, you don't feel threatened to vote in person, that option is always available to you as well.
Absolutely.
And the absentee ballot is also available up until the day before the election. Those ballots, they're still working out. It's anticipated that most city and town halls will be open by the end of the month, and absentee ballots are expected to be available around July 21st.
And that's a good point.
August 11th, sorry, August 11th.
And that's a really good point, because I have voted by absentee before, because I've known I was going to be out of state on election day. And so I have voted by absentee. And in many, I think in almost every instance, I actually just went to City Hall, to the town clerk's office, and I filled out my ballot right there. And I never had any concern or question about it being counted. And I feel like it's always worked for me to vote by absentee when I knew I was going to be out of town. I never wanted to miss any election. I've been I don't know that I have since being an adult. I think I voted in every election. But I do want.
Oh, I just wanted to address a question that came up about application, what the deadline is to mail in applications. As soon as possible, of course, but there will be, the ballots will be available July 21st. It's more important that as soon as you receive your ballot in the mail, to get that out as soon as possible, within 4 days if possible, so that it will arrive in time. It takes about 4 business days for the ballot to be received once you've completed it. But as far as applications, there is no deadline between now and the 21st when the absentee ballots are available.
And one last point to make clear to folks is that if someone that you know, if you yourself or someone you know is not registered to vote, you can register to vote now. You can, and you can do that either by downloading online your registration forms and mailing them in. You can also, once City Hall is open, you can go and register to vote at City Hall. And we in Connecticut have same-day registration. So on election day, if you know someone who hasn't yet registered and they've decided on that moment they really do want to vote, we always encourage them to register at City Hall that day, and we'll be able to do that this year. We've been told that there will be same-day registration. So
I also wanted to mention that there are some community events happening, socially distanced appropriate events happening in Danbury where there will be opportunities to register to vote. Great. So someone will be there at a table or a booth with applications. We've got 5 minutes left, Senator. I know you wanted to talk about some things happening in the special session. I didn't know if part of that was for the November, similar to the presidential primary, if people would be getting automatically through the mail their absentee application to vote, or that's part of what you're discussing.
So the special session will determine that, but what we've been discussing is the same mechanisms as we have in place through the executive order would be the approach that we would legislate, so that we do anticipate that voting in November would be the same as voting in the primary. And I think we want to do that. We want to make sure that people are familiar with the process and so have the same process for November. And I do expect that to happen in special session. The special session dates have not been set yet, but we are pretty close to having dates, I would say. But we anticipate it's going to be the week of July 20th. And possibly the week of July 27th. So we may actually go into that next week. There is an unusual time. We're going to have to implement some safety measures so that we can be in the building together. And those details have been largely worked out, but they're still underway. The House and the Senate, aside from opening day, probably will not be in on the same day, so that we decrease the number of people at any one time in those buildings. We have a legislature with 151 members of the House and 36 senators, and that's a lot of people to begin with. But when you add all the staff that have to be there to have an effective session, we came up with something like 700 people that would be in the building. So there are a lot of precautions that need to be taken to get us ready for the special session. Then there's the whole process of trying to figure out how we're going to legislate. And there's a lot of discussion going on about the approach and what bills will be taken up. I think there's general agreement to take up the absentee balloting, the voting issues. There has been a widespread agreement that we should address police accountability because of recent events and the sort of horrific events around George Floyd's murder and other police excessive use of force that we've seen over recent months. And there's been widespread response to that by the public and a demand that we address this. And so there is an understanding that we're going to have a police accountability bill. But I am proud to stand with the Senate Democrats, and we established an entire agenda called the Juneteenth.
Very good. Yeah, I went through that. It's a lot of items. You guys did a lot of work on that.
We really want to take the time to address racial equity issues in this special session and to do it now while people really understand the importance of it, and it's very timely. We also feel like there are there's a lot of legislation that's required relative to the pandemic as well. So I hope we'll have a full agenda. That's what I've been advocating for on behalf of the constituents from the 24th.
Well, and you work tirelessly on our behalf. I know that. So people to get in touch with you, you are doing some campaigning for the ages, doing some phone banking if people are interested in helping you in your campaign. You have your Facebook page, State Senator Julie Kushner.
That's right.
And you want to give maybe some phone numbers if people have constituent questions to direct?
Sure. Absolutely. But you're going to have to let me go to get it off of my...
Oh, okay. In the half minute that we have left, if you haven't already joined Senator Julie's Facebook page, I encourage you to do that. She has a lot of updated information. She interviews people. She really keeps people in touch with what's happening. And that number?
So to reach on a constituent concern, you can call my Hartford office, which is area code 860-240-0509. If you want to volunteer or ask a campaign question, I also have a campaign line, which is 203-751-0903. So you can catch me at either one of those. And we do have someone answering the phone all the time. You can always send me emails. I'm really accessible. And I hope to be out in the community more as it's safer and people feel comfortable.
And we'll have you back here. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy day and joining us here at the Community Forum.
Thank you so much for including me.